Buon anno nuovo to everybody wherever you are. And to start the new year, I thought it might be pleasurable for everybody, and for my first talk in the new year, to give a talk that's really going to figuratively and literally, I hope, warm us up. Warming up is needed even in January. In Umbria, it can be icy cold, which it is right now. We have a lot of snow on Mount Subasio, although we don't have snow right near our house. There have been tremendous snowstorms throughout Italy. You may have read about that. But January is a month of warmth too. The month of the wonderful festivals which take place in Cascia, when the locals celebrate the arrival of the new year with their extraordinary Pasqualari festivals. And we're going to be starting our talk this evening in Cascia. And we'll start with the festival of the Pasqualari. The Pasquarelli is the name of the song. The Pasqualari are those who sing them, really meaning the songs of Pascha. And we'll talk about the origin of this and why they're called Pasquarellari and Pasquarelli. This festival takes place in Cascia at the end of January. It is a festival about 3 days of the singing of the folk music of the rural people. And we can locate Cascia right here on the map. This is a map of Umbria, Italy's green heart. You can see Cascia with the orange circle around it in the lower right-hand corner. We're talking about the towns tonight of the southeastern corner of Umbria. Cascia, near it in the yellow circle is Norcia, near Norcia. In the blue circle is Preci. You can see that Norcia and Preci are extremely close to the Marches region of Italy, called Le Marche in Italian, whereas Cascia is very close to Latium. Just to the south of Cascia, you can see the Latium town of Rieti. Rieti is very near Greccio. And those of you who were present for my Christmas lecture remember that the first nativity scene is presented to the people by St. Francis of Assisi in Greccio near Rieti in 1223. And here we have Assisi with a red circle. I just put that in to let you know the area in which I live and from which I'm speaking this evening. But we're going to center our talk this evening on the southeastern corner of Umbria. The Pasquarelli festival, called the Rassegna delle Pasquarelle, or the review or the presentation of the Pasquarelli songs, takes place in the medieval hill town on a mountaintop of Cascia. And here you see Cascia in the winter. This is as we saw Cascia when we were present for the Rassegna delle Pasquarelli some years ago. And the origins of Cascia are probably dating to way before Christ, probably the 6th century BC. It was probably founded by an Italic people. Let us remember that in this part of Umbria, the Etruscans were never here in the 6th to 8th century BC, but a native agricultural people living in tribes were present, Italic tribes. So an Italic tribe probably settled on this hill. The city is a Roman municipium called Carsula, and it is destroyed by an earthquake. This is a highly seismic area, all this area we're talking about tonight. This city, too, had damage in the terrible earthquake October 30th to 2016. And the survivors of the earthquake during the Roman period headed to the hill up there where they settled and they rebuilt. The name Cascia is first mentioned as an urban entity in the 6th century AD, when historians write about the attack on this city by the Byzantines of the Eastern Roman Empire. Their capital is Constantinople, as you may remember from your history. So the Byzantines attack in the 6th century AD, and then the Longobards move in, and they dominate this area from the 6th to 8th century AD. The Longobards, this Germanic tribe, have 3 dukedoms in Italy. One is near Milan. Its center is Pavia. One is in Umbria area, Umbria today. Spoleto, the Duchy of Spoleto, was Longobard, therefore Germanic overlords ruling. The other was in southern Italy, Benevento, in the present-day region of Campania. And after devastation by the Byzantines and then by the Longobards, it's not over yet. After the Longobards, the pirates, North African Muslim pirates, the Saracens, move in and they will attack Cascia as well. It arises as a free medieval city-state in about the 12th century. And here is the domination of the Trinci family of Foligno, a noble family. It's a flowering period for this city of Cascia, the Middle Ages, as is that period for most of the Umbrian city-states, such as Assisi, Perugia, Spoleto. They all come to great life in the Middle Ages and become quite famous. And later it will come under domination of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II as well. This city is most known, however, for its Saint Rita of Cascia, Augustinian saint. She was born at the end of the 14th century, died in the 15th century. Her feast is celebrated on May 22nd. You can see this photo on the left of the procession. The statue of Santa Rita is being carried with great devotion by the gentlemen of Cascia. Red roses at her feet, red rose in her hand, associated with a legend attached to Saint Rita. She was dying. She was very ill. She was cared for by her Augustinian sisters in the city of Cascia. She had been born in a little village called 𝓫𝓮𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓸 outside Cascia. And when a relative came to her and said, "What can I bring you? What can I bring you?" Although it was wintertime, she said, "Oh, I would love a rose from my garden of 𝓫𝓮𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓸." Relative went to the garden, didn't believe it could be possible, but what was blooming there but a red rose? And the fig tree had figs, and she brought them back to the saint. So she's always associated with the red rose. This is the city of Cascia, not in the winter, which you see in the background. And in the foreground is a mammoth statue of Santa Rita. It's about 20 feet high. It was put there in 2015, and it is a gift of the country of Lebanon. Interestingly, the Christian community of Lebanon is very devoted to Santa Rita di Cascia. The former president was Sulman, and his daughter's name was Rita. And Lebanon wished to present this statue to the city. The city accepted. Drawings were done, which were sent to the Augustinian community of Cascia. They approved the drawings, and a famous Lebanese sculptor created this statue. She was carved from a piece of marble weighing 27 tons. By the time the statue was finished, it weighed 25 tons. It was shipped on a cruise ship to Italy, the Grimaldi lines, delivered to just south of Rome, taken into Rome where Pope Francis blessed it, and then it was carted up on a huge truck to Cascia. And here you can see the erection of the statue of Santa Rita di Cascia in October, and this was in 2015. The highest statue of St. Rita in the world, however, is, let me just think, I think it is something like 56 meters high. It's in Brazil. The Pasqualari sing their Pasquarelli through the streets of Cascia at the end of January. And this is a tradition which always is practiced for welcoming in the new year. The Pasqualari often sing house to house at the Rassegna delle Pasquarelle, or the review of the songs called Pasquarelle. About 30 groups of Pasqualari from all over central Italy meet in Cascia. The Pasqualari are singers, not just in the region of Umbria, but the tradition is also carried on in the regions of Latium, a bit of Tuscany, Emilia-Romagna, and the Marches region. What are they singing? They're announcing the coming of the Messiah. They're announcing the arrival of the Magi. They're bringing good wishes for health and prosperity in the new year, and propitious wishes for fertility of the lands, because of course these are songs sung by people very much attached to the lands, the rural people, inextricably attached to the natural world. Another propitious wish, often sung by the Pasqualati when they go to the home of a man, young or old, they sing him wishes in dialect, these are all sung in dialect, to someday find himself a young bride. And these groups are meeting in Cascia for this review, but generally the Pasqualati actually sing house to house. And they're singing in dialect. They sing traditional songs, but they add new twists to them. The songs are passed on from generation to generation. Young people learn them from fathers and grandfathers. The Pasqualati might also be called Pasqualotti, Pasquelanti, or Pasquaroli. Now, in all these words, we have the word Pasqua, because the Pasqua is the announcing of a feast. And in central Italy, we have 3 Pasqua feasts. The Pasqua of the Epiphania, which is the arrival of the Magi to visit the Christ child. The Pasqua of the Risurrezione, the resurrection, Easter. And the Pasqua of the Pentecost. So these are feasts celebrated in Umbria, all with the name Pasqua in front of them. But the Pasqualati are singing principally in January for the welcoming of the Magi and so forth, and the announcing of the arrival of the arrival of the Messiah. The Pasqualati might also be called Befanotti. Befana is the good witch, which you may remember if you were in on my Christmas lecture. That, by the way, is on my website now, as are all of my past presentations. And you can see little Befanas right here in the front. This is a group of young Pasqualati called Befanotti. That's another name for them, the Befana singers. And Befana is often present in the Pasqualati groups. There's an image of Befana on the left. These people are participating in the Rassegna dei Pasqualati and will be singing. She's dressed as Befana. Befana is a delightful legend. The story is, by the way, the name is a corruption of the word Epiphania, Greek, meaning manifestation of a divinity. It will become Piphania, Bifania, Befania, and then Befana. The story is that she was a good witch. Well, she was an old woman, actually, who was sweeping her home in the Holy Land when 3 kings came by and said to her, come with us, there's a new king. Come with us to adore him. And she swished them away with her broom, and she said, leave me alone, I'm busy. I have to finish my house, it's not clean yet. And they left. Then she heard who the new king was, and with great remorse, she went looking for this new king, bearing gifts to give to him, and carrying a broom to give to his mother to help her with her housekeeping. It's said that she never actually found the Christ child, but she wanders through the sky the night before the arrival of the Magi, January 5th, on her broom, the Befana, and she will fill the stockings of the children. So, and I mentioned in my Christmas lecture, our children were always the envy of everybody in their classes at school, because they're children of an American and an Italian. So their stockings were filled on Christmas Eve by Santa Claus, Babbo Natale, and on January 5th by the Befana. So the Befana is present often in these groups of Pasqualati. And there she is singing her heart out along with other musicians. Here is the Befana in the midst of other Pasqualati, and they're often wearing the dress of the shepherds, because the figures presented in these groups of Pasqualati will be the Magi, the shepherds, Mary, Joseph, the Befana. You can see their hats lined with sheep's wool, their sheep's wool vests, their accordions. Present will often be the Blessed Virgin. There she is, the Christ child, Saint Joseph, and the Magi. Here are the Magi singing. This is another, these are all different groups that were present on stage singing the Pasqualari at this Rassegna delle Pasquarelle in Cascia. And dance will be included as well. Young people as well as old people joining in. These young boys were quite amazing. They're dancing with great glee. Look at the children behind them, how excited they are. They're talking to each other and saying, look at those two go. They're singing the saltarello, which is a typical Umbrian folk dance. So dancing is included as well as the music at this Rassegna delle Pasquarelle, or the review of the mountain shepherds' songs. And in this image, you can see the Virgin, Joseph, the Magi, other Pasqualari, and look at this instrument right here. There are some amazing instruments played by these people. They're made by hand. They have old origins, ancient ones. This that I just pointed out to is called the Trike Balake. These instruments have wonderful onomatopoeic names. Their names like the sound they'll make. These are three mallets. The two on the outside strike the one on the inside, creating a percussion. Trike Balake. The Trike Balake is played right here by this gentleman in the center. And this you can see is the name of the group, the Pasquarellari, or the Pasquarelli singers from this little town called Correse Terra. Another Trike Balake here, played by this group. Those gentlemen will soon be going on stage at this competition. Trike Balake is right here, and I've printed out the two words. You could distinguish them. The Pasqualari join to sing the joyous Pasquarelle. So the Pasquarelle are the songs. Look at their dress, like the shepherds, the woolen leggings that the shepherds would wear in the winter. Another instrument which is played is the putipu, another onomatopoeic word, like the Cacavela, another onomatopoeic word. And this is a friction drum, and it has three parts. The drum is either an earthenware terracotta pan. It can be a wooden tub. Sometimes it's a large tin can. It's covered with the skin of an animal, generally a goat skin or rabbit skin. And if those skins are not available, it will be a piece of cloth covering it. And then the musicians will push into this drum with a cane rod. And here we see the putipu, or the Cacavela. This is an elderly woman. She's in the area of Naples, this woman here, playing at one of their festivals, because these instruments, both the Trike Balake and the putipu, originate in southern Italy in the area of Naples. And you can see here, this is definitely an animal skin covering this one. And you can see this is a cane rod. And as I mentioned, these young people learn from their older parents, uncles, grandfathers. Eduardo was absolutely astounding. He's 6 years old and an astounding little accordion player. Now, I would like you to hear some of this wonderful music of the Pasqualari. And as you look here, please notice the different instruments, the Trike Balake, notice the putipu, the accordions. They will use tambourines, triangles as well. And there's another extraordinary instrument that the gentleman playing it has made. So let's enjoy now a minute of Pasqualari.
Tirare,
couldn't you just tell the pleasure, the passion, the joy with which these pasquellari are sung? It is really such an integral part of the folkloristic culture of Umbria, and it is so much an example of the warmth of an Umbrian winter, really warm. Near Cascia, about 25 kilometers away, is the mountain town of Norcia. Its ancient name was Norcia, its Roman name. In fact, today the inhabitants of Norcia are called Norcini, not Norcini. That's going to be something else, which you'll learn about very soon. Norcini are the inhabitants of Norcia. This is best known as the birthplace of Saint Benedict in the late 5th century. He's the founder of Western monasticism, born here of a noble Roman family with his twin sister Scholastica. He was raised mostly in Rome, and then he will undertake the life of a hermit for some years in caves near Subiaco in the area of Latium, and eventually establish the monastery, which is very famous for World War II history, Monte Cassino. Terribly bombed by the Allies in World War II. They assumed the Germans were hiding out there. They actually weren't. And Monte Cassino was destroyed. But let us go back to the ancient history of Norcia, just before the birth of, roughly before the birth of Benedict, which is 5th century AD. We can talk about the settlement of this area by the Romans. The Romans settled here in the 3rd century AD, and there had been an Italic tribe living here as well, just as in Norcia, as early as the 5th century BC. By the 4th century AD, there was a diocese here because there'd been evangelization by the bishop of Foligno, San Feliciano, and the people became very devout, very attached to Christianity. So Benedict and his sister were born in this town of great religious fervor. Here we have an image of a medieval image of Saint Benedict and his twin sister Scholastica. The city will undergo devastation by the Goths in the 4th to 5th century AD. They were a Germanic tribe living north of the Danube, present-day Ukraine, present-day, Romania and Moldavia. And it was later sacked by the Longobards, just as Cascia was, and then by the Saracens in the 9th century. The people abandoned the town after all these attacks, and there was a period of decadence. And then this will become part of the Papal States. If you look at this building, you can see the great force and power of it. This building actually survives the October 2016 earthquake. This is the Castellina. This is a papal fortress built in the 16th century at the request of the Pope Julius III, who wished a military presidio in Norcia for maximum control of the papal territories. At that time, the walls around Norcia were built and later strengthened as well. The Castellina now houses a museum. It holds all the artistic treasures of Norcia. It stands stalwart. It stands strongly. It resisted the earthquake of October 30th, 2016. This is Norcia, a photo taken of that same piazza in October, but October 6th of 2016. The Castellina, or papal fortress, would be just to the right in this picture. This is Norcia, October 6th, 2016. This is Norcia, October 30th, 2016. The Benedictine Basilica San Benedetto was destroyed. All that survives of it is the facade. It still has not been restored. It's a heartbreak for Norcia. I spoke to the president of the Rotary Club the other day. What is the prospects for restoration? We know nothing yet. He said we have had two tremendous pains in the past few years, the earthquake and then the pandemic. This is all scaffolded now. You can see the scaffolding here on the facade of the basilica. The Basilica Di San Benedetto was said to have been built on the site of the home of Benedictine Scholastica. There was a small church built there, and the present format of the church was built between the 13th and 14th centuries. And then it was destroyed, took a lot of damage in an earthquake, I believe, in the 17th century, and they redid it in the Baroque style. The interior had been actually Baroque. Now, you can see the bell tower of City Hall to the left. And in this photo, I took this photo when the year, I think we're at the fair that we're going to be seeing in a minute. So this was about 2017, 2018. The City Hall here, which was built in the 19th century, was still scaffolded. It is scaffolded no longer. It has been restored, and the dedication after the restoration was December 8th of this year. So tragically, look at the basilica, however. It's still in its cage. It's looking out on the piazza. This is a photo of the basilica before the earthquake, and what I'd like to point out here is the portico on the right, and that was added in the 16th century, and it was a place where grains were sold. There was a kind of farmer's market there. And if you look at that bell tower is actually a restoration, because the original bell tower was damaged in another terrible earthquake. This is a seismic area of 1703. And then this bell tower was constructed after it. And in this image here, this fresco by Francesco Sparapane, which is in a church of Norcia under restoration, Santa Maria Argentea. This is a 16th century fresco, and I'd like you to note the image of the basilica. Benedict is lovingly holding his basilica, but look at that bell tower. That's the bell tower that came down in the earthquake of 1703. That is a 14th century bell tower, which was towering over the city of Norcia. He seems to be lovingly indicating to us, look at my beloved city. And Scholastic on the right is holding her rosary as if she's praying for her beloved city. The monks of Norcia lost their home as well. And the monks of Norcia is a community of Benedictines. They're now living outside of the town. Their monastery was damaged heavily in the earthquake. This photo was taken about 2 years after the earthquake. They're praying in the main square. Interestingly, the group of monks of Norcia is a community of about 15 Benedictine monks. And their average age is about 35. And after the earthquake, they moved out to the countryside outside of Norcia. They now have a monastery near a church which is being restored, Santa Maria della Misericordia, which means Our Lady of Mercy. And here we can see a photo of the restoration going on the church, which is right near their monastery. And this is from the roof of the church. We're looking, if you will, out towards Norcia. They very much miss living in Norcia. And Giovanni, the president of the Rotary Club of Norcia, told me that the Norcini very much miss the friars. He said they were very much part of the heart of our life. They brought the Benedictine community back to Norcia. The Benedictines will return to Norcia with them, with this group of Benedictines, in about 20 years ago, 2002, I think it was. And for many years before that, there had not been a community in Norcia. So they miss having them in the town. And this is the church which is being restored, La Madonna della Misericordia. And this church was built on the site of a 16th century church, which is actually associated with the Franciscans, with the Capuchins. They're working, these Benedictines. After all, part of their motto is ora et labores, work and prayer. And they have a birreria, a brewing company. They produce the birra Norcia, And I've put the word up there. You can all look it up if you wish on the blog. They have a wonderful blog, Birra Norcia in English, excellent, different notes, all about restoration. And there is a note on the blog which says, "Thank you for buying our beer. Purchase of it helps us in our restoration." There's one of the brewing monks. Now, the monks at one time, the Benedictines, were not associated with beer, but actually with pigs. And it's quite interesting, the story. In the mountains of Norcia, in the Middle Ages, the people, the farmers, would take the pigs out to graze in the oak groves. This was before deforestation, called disboscamento, of the wooded area around Norcia. That will happen with the medieval city-states. When they want greater farmland, they're going to be cutting down the forest. Before that time, in the early Middle Ages, let's just say 7th to 11th century, the area was known for the raising of the pigs. They took them out, they fattened them up in the oak woods, they ate the acorns. Their pigs became so famous, the pigs of the Norcini farmers, that they were sold, they were purchased by people in areas around Norcia. The slaughter of the pigs in December, January is also depicted on the great fountain of Perugia called La Fontana Maggiore. And the Fontana Maggiore was built at the end of the 13th century. Marvelous work, one of the finest works in Umbria of sculpture by the Pisanos, father and son, Giovanni Nicola Pisano. And around the fountain, I want to go back to it, the lower level of the fountain, there are 25 panels. 24 of them are divided into groups to create the 12 months of the year. And they illustrate the agricultural and tasks of the common man. This is elevation of the tasks of the common man and the farmers on the great fountain of Perugia in Carrara marble. Look at that stunning relief there. Now, this is Capricorn. And Capricorn, of course, is the month. It's the end of December to late January. This is the time of the pig slaughter. And this image here, they're from 1280. And so you can see how important was the person who slaughtered the pigs, later called a Norcino, the man from Norcia, because Norcia was so famous for the raising of the pigs, the slaughtering of them, that the pig butcher throughout Italy is called the Norcino, a man from Norcia. The person who lives in Norcia, remember, is called a Norcino. So here you have the pig hung up, it's being slit open, the blood is, being caught up here, it will be later turned into sausages. This is quite delightful. The farmer is carrying the pig into his cellar where it will hang until the sausages and prosciutto and everything are made. Look at that dog with his paw up on the knee. Look at the drapery here, the transparent drapery. The dog seems to be saying, "Give me a bite." This is an absolutely extraordinary masterpiece of Umbrian sculpture work. By the way, let me mention this. Some of you saw my lecture on the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi with the frescoes of Giotto. When he came to Assisi to fresco in the Basilica, there's no doubt he studied this fountain of Perugia. And this is where he's going to learn three-dimensional perspective in painting from all these wonderful figures on the upper basin. Now, have a look at this photo, carried into the cellar where it will be hung up. And there is our pig hanging in our cellar off the kitchen. 1976, I believe, January, that was our first pig slaughter. These are all our preserves that we put up that summer. And holding on a little pig's tail is Antonia, the wife of the Norcino Adamo, who helped us turn our pig into prosciutto, capocollo, salami. There's Adamo's hands working here, and there's Adamo right here. And he's assisted by Pino, my husband, right here in his jeans. and by his son-in-law Marino. Marino is holding the pig's intestines, which have been carefully cleaned with vinegar and so forth, and they are going to hold the salami. The salamis are being made right here. These are two friends, Mary from Britain and her Umbrian husband Renato and our Umbrian friend Massimiliano. So this is our Norcino Adamo. The Norcino was generally a farmer, Adamo was, who made extra money during the winter months by going around to all of his farm friends and helping them with their pig slaughter and the making of, he's the one who knows how much salt in that prosciutto, how long to age your salami, et cetera, et cetera. You need a great Norcino. The man from Norcia, is the Norcino. The Norcino is the one who will take care of the production of the pig and turning it into prosciutto, salami, and capocollo. Preci is very noted for its association with the Benedictines, and outside of Preci, which is a small medieval hill town not far from Norcia, outside of Preci was the lovely monastery of Sant'Eutizio, the Abbey Church. The Benedictine head of a Benedictine order is called an abbot, and their church is called an abbey. And the Benedictines outside the city of Preci were experts in the art of butchery, actually, because their first task, their first learning, their first knowledge was centered on the care of the health of people. And part of the Benedictine rule is to care for the health of the people. And the Benedictines had extensive gardens of growing medicinal herbs and plants and so forth, and great associations as well with the medical school of Salerno. This is the first European medical school. It's called the Scuola Chirurgica, founded in Salerno in the 9th century. And this image is from a miniature of the Persian medical treatise, the Canon of Avicenna of the 11th century. So the Benedictines of the Abbey of Sant'Eutizio were in close contact with the medical school of Salerno. And by the 12th century, there was actually a surgical school as well in nearby Preci, because of its association with the monastery or the Abbey Church outside of it. And it became famous in all of Europe from the late Middle Ages to the 18th century. Probably medicinal practices were practiced in this town of Preci as early as the Roman period. There was a temple here to the goddess Cibele, and she was the goddess of nature. She was the protector of animals, and all of her high priests who served her had to be castrated. Now that has something to do with the city of Preci and with the Abbey of Sant'Eutizio. The monks of the abbey specialized in various surgical practices. But as of 1215, the Lateran Council forbade the practice of medicine to deacons and priests. And therefore, in order to transmit their medical knowledge and surgical skills, the Benedictine monks of the Abbey of Sant'Eutizio began to instruct about 30 families of Preci, creating a veritable medical dynasty. As they were experts in the art of butchery, especially pigs, it was easy for these villagers of Preci to learn also from the monks the surgical skills which they were taught. And these medical dynasties peaked in the 16th century, and surgeons from the Preci and Norcia area were often called to the courts of Europe. They were such noted surgeons. One actually from Preci operated, his name was Cesare Scacchi. He operated on Queen Elizabeth I cataracts, and she was healed extremely well. She rewarded him with 1,000 crowns. They were noted for their cataract surgery, hernias, and so forth. And In 2009, they actually opened a museum in Preci called the Museo della Scuola Chirurgica, the Museum of Surgery in Preci. And it contains some of the medical books and the surgical tools used by the surgeons of Preci. Now, after a while, their skill was used for something else. By I think it was the 15th century, it was not possible for, yes, it was about the 15th, 16th century. The church mandated that women could not be singing in the choirs. And at this time, therefore, the castrati became the beautiful young voices singing throughout Europe. That is, young boys between the ages of 6 and 8 castrated. In Europe in the 18th century, there were 4,000 castrati. And of those 4,000, I think about 800 were from the area of Preci. So you see the medical knowledge of the surgeons of Preci is also used to create the great mellifluous voices, if you will, of the young castrati. Women could not sing in the Sistine choir. And it is said that in Preci, sometimes young boys between 8 and 10 were willfully castrated by their parents so they could someday achieve fame in the great choirs of Europe. This is a beautiful scene, a scene I mean to tell you of the beautiful town of Preci, which you can see before the earthquake of October 30th, 2016. It's now not possible to visit this town. There's no longer the dynasty of surgical families in Preci, but outside the walls and inside the walls, there are certain very skilled butchers, which we now know are called norcini, having learned the art from those in the area of Norcia. And these brothers here, Roberto and Massimiliano, sell the typical products of the norcino. These are coppietta, which is a kind of chewy dried pig meat. You can see the prosciutto, the coglioni del mulo, a kind of salami. And the coppa right here, this is head cheese. Roberto here is cutting down some of his mazzafegati, which is a sausage made with the liver of the pig. This here is guanciale di maiale, or the pork cheek. So the norcinos specialize in the transformation of the pork meat to the goodness which is so appreciated in Umbria. This is a cialuscolo salami. These are salamis which could not be dried. They were often carried by shepherds when they took their sheep up to the back pastures. They didn't have time to let those salamis dry in an attic or whatever. And so they would be eating these fresh salamis. A norcino does not only sell pork products, but corn flour for polenta, legumes, the wonderful lentils of Castelluccio, the area of Norcia, is known for its lentils and other legumes. It's known for its sheep milk cheeses and especially for truffles. This is a cheese here with black truffles shaved into it. Roberto is extremely proud of his formaggio al tartufo cheese with truffles. And this is a norcino who has his products on a stand in front of his norcineria. You can see the name here, norcineria. And that is the name of the store where the products of the norcino are sold. This is actually in Norcia, and this is during a festival there which celebrates black truffle. And here you can see a cheese with black truffle of Norcia. This festival is called Nero di Norcia, the black of Norcia. This is not actually a black truffle. It's meant to represent a black truffle. This is Pino. When we were at that festival a couple years ago, the city gate, Porta Ascolana, part of the 15th century city gates of Norcia, all scaffolded. This young girl is helping her father. They were selling not black truffles, but the prized white truffles. The main square of Norcia scaffolded, and you could see City Hall was still scaffolded. And this is during the Nero di Norcia Mostra Mercato. Mostra mercato, mercato, you know, means market, mostra to show, as in demonstration. So a mostra mercato is really a festival which is a show and sell. The products are sold, they're offered for tastings as well. And they're not only sold, they're not only shown, they're also sold. Here we have black truffle on the right, and this young couple too, they're selling their black truffles. Truffle pâtés are sold, so you could make up truffle on your pasta when you get home. And you can see here the price of the truffles. White truffle, €3,500 for a kilo, or 2.2 pounds. Black truffles cheaper, just €500 for a kilo. And she's saying, have a sniff. She wants him to just sniff the glasses to understand the beautiful smell that the truffles are giving. She doesn't want his nose right on the truffle. So she's just saying senti, but she just wants him to smell the covers. And at the Nero di Norcia, those are the two posters showing before and after the earthquake. Salamis are sold as well. There are many norcineria offering their products. But the big hits are the truffles. And here you can see the prices. One truffle, €5, a couple are 10, and so forth. To just give you an idea of the value of the truffle. As I think most of you are known, it's an underground tuberous hunted up by dogs. No, not by pigs. Pigs would eat them. Wild boars certainly find them, though. But the tartufari, those who go for the truffles, train their dogs, because the dogs will sniff it out but won't eat it. This is a stand of a norcineria at the Nero di Norcia festival. The city is full of norcinerias, selling everything from legumes to prosciutto to the cheeses and so forth. This is the famous norcineria of the Ansuini family. They're all suffering now, all these norcineria. Some of them have these places outside Norcia where they aged the prosciutti. They were damaged in the earthquakes. It's been a very, very difficult situation for the norcini of Norcia. This is two people of the Norcineria Ansuini, which we just saw, father and son. They have been in the art of the transformation of pigs into delicious pork products for generations. Now, we went into the Norcineria of another Norcineria here in Norcia of Felice some years ago, a couple years ago when we were in Norcia. Actually, it was just 2 years ago when we were in Norcia in January to make a couple purchases. And this is, I believe his name is Stefano behind the counter. And here we have all the salamis and so forth. And what we wanted to do was to create a package, I remember. It was Julia's birthday. So we put in some various things, and I believe we even put in this thick spaghetti called strangozzi with black truffle. I think we put in some porcini mushrooms. I'm not sure if we put in the polenta with truffle sauce. We did include the birra dei frati di Norcia, the birra Norcia of the monks of Norcia. And actually it's included right here in the gift box. Now, I want to mention this. Not just lentils are sold in the norcineria, and you can see the famous lentils of Castelluccio, but the Rovaya bean as well sold. The Rovaya is the famous lost bean of the city of Cascia. And we first met the Rovaya at the Festival of the Tradizioni Rurali some years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I think it was. And that is also in January in Cascia. Let me tell you, Cascia warms up in the winter with these extraordinary festivals. This is a Pasquellaro. His name is Beppe di Lillo, and he came in with his oxen because this is all tied to the feast of St. Anthony Abbot, who's the patron saint of animals, and his feast is January 17th. So the Feast of Rural Traditions is just after the days when they bless all the animals. So he's going in towards the festival with his oxen, playing the Pasquellari. Those oxen, I'm sure, have just been recently blessed for the Feast of St. Anthony. And inside one of the food tents, we met two women. One is 𝓹𝓮𝓬𝓸𝓷𝓸, and I don't remember her name. She was an assistant of 𝓹𝓮𝓬𝓷𝓸, another woman who also raises rovaya. And they were serving this an amazing soup called rovaya. And so we lined up with everybody else to have this zuppa di rovaya. And later talked to 𝓹𝓮𝓬𝓷𝓸 and learned about the history of the Rovaya bean and her finding of it. The Rovaya bean was probably cultivated as early as the Neolithic period. That is about 10,000 BC, when people first started farming the land and living in agricultural communities. The Rovaya bean, historians have found out, was very prized by the Greeks. It was prized by the Romans. It was used by the Romans to create a kind of polenta soup. And it was cultivated in the Middle Ages. It appears in a document of the 16th century, and then it simply disappears. There's the Rovaya bean. In 1998, 𝓹𝓮𝓬𝓷𝓸 and her sister-in-law are cleaning out the old cellar of her father-in-law in the little town of Civita di Cascia. 1979, there was a terrible earthquake again in the Cascia area, and many people abandoned the small villages. Civita di Cascia now has about 50 people living in it. And in the cellar of their father-in-law, they found a tin can with some seeds in it. And on the tin can was written the word Roveggia, scribbled, Roveggia. They asked around. People weren't able to identify it, most of the farm people. And then they showed the beans to a grandmother, an elderly woman named Lucia. And Lucia looked at the bean and said, Rovaya, ma come spacca la schiena. The Rovaya bean, what a backbreaker. And then 𝓹𝓮𝓬𝓷𝓸 explained to me why the Rovaya cultivation had just stopped eventually. It was a very, very laborious crop to create. It is, some biologists relate it to the common pea or the domestic pea. Others say, no, it's its own variety. Others say it's related to some sort of wild pea. But it is very difficult to cultivate. It is very time consuming in the sense it grows high on a stalk. It'll grow up to over a yard high. The beans have to be cut down, scythed by hand when half of the leaves of the plant are yellow. This will be about June or July. The seeds are starting to be waxy. The stalks are cut and they're left to dry. Once they're dried, they're on the threshing floor in a nearby barn. They're beaten until the seeds are separated from the husks, and then the seeds are sieved to separate them from impurities. So it's a very, very time-consuming task. Word got out, however, on the Rovaya beans because 𝓹𝓮𝓬𝓷𝓸 and her sister Silvana started to cultivate it. And by 2006, it is one of the slow food of Italy's presidio. The slow food movement was started by Carlo Petrini in 2006, and he lives in northern Italy, I believe in the area of Piedmont. And his theory was everyone has the right to good, clean, fair food. So the name is a contrast to fast food. And to be a slow food presidia, these four elements are necessary. A slow food presidia sustains the quality of production when extinction is risked, the case of Rovaya. It protects unique regions and ecosystems. It recovers traditional processing methods, and it safeguards native breeds and local plant varieties. There are now 78 countries in the world associated with the slow food, with presidia. I believe there are about 13,000 now producers. In Italy, there are 250 slow food presidias. There are 4 in Cascia, 4 producers of the Rovaya who are all recognized as slow food presidia. And so after we heard all this and learned all this from 𝓵𝓮𝓬𝓸𝓷𝓸, we had to actually purchase some Rovaya beans. And there's Pino with our Rovaya beans. This is Lucia, her niece, talking to Pino with great enthusiasm about the Rovaya, how to cook it, how you could make it into polenta and so forth. And this is actually Rovaya beans ground up so that you can make a polenta. And we took those home and I soaked them all night and cooked them a long, long time. I later told 𝓵𝓮𝓬𝓸𝓷𝓸 about this on the telephone. I said, Mamma mia, thank God I had the wood stove, because they cooked all day long. She just laughed. She said, no, you really need a pressure cooker. So they cooked hours and hours on the wood stove. I added potatoes and onion and carrots and garlic, sort of done what 𝓵𝓮𝓬𝓷𝓸𝓷𝓸 had advised, added a little bit of our olive oil at the end. And that was our delicious Rovaya soup. Bay leaf was in it too. And we have had Rovaya soup once, because I haven't yet had the time to, again, cook it about 8 or 9 hours on the wood stove. Now, near Cascia, there is, outside of Norcia, an area famous for another legume, and this is lentils. And lentils grow on the Great Plain, which spreads out before the little mountain village of Cascia, of Castelluccio di Norcia. Castelluccio di Norcia was probably settled by a pre-Italic tribe. And there is even evidence of a Roman settlement there, because they found near Cascia part of a Roman urn in terracotta. On the road out of Cascia, even a Roman tomb. And it becomes very important in the Middle Ages as a defensive point from attacks coming from Norcia. And there was a castle here. And the castle actually was called Castello di 𝓫𝓮𝓵𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓸𝓵 was the corruption of the word. It was a Longobards word. And in this town, about 60 farm families lived. They were lentil growers, shepherds, breeders of cattle and pigs, and they united in a cooperative. And in the earthquake of October 2016, much of this town was destroyed. This is it prior to the earthquake. And below it on the Great Plain, you could see the lentils. The Great Plain, the Piano Grande, is about 4,500 feet above sea level, nearly 5,000 feet above sea level. It's absolutely stunning. The first time my brother looked out over the Great Plain, Bill had traveled extensively in that part of the world. He said, it looks like Tibet. It is really something to see. This is the Great Plain, the Piano Grande. And right over there is the little town of Castelluccio. And this is the time of the lentil cultivation. They are also shepherds, as mentioned. And in this photo here by a friend, Marco Fraccolancia, thank you for this photo, Marco, you can see the fields planted for lentils. This is the lentil plant here. And this town is famous for the lenticchie di Castelluccio. This is an IGP product. IGP stands for Indicazione Geografica Protetta, geographic protected area, meaning that at least one phase of the cultivation and harvesting of this product must take place in a particular area and only in that area. So this is an IGP product of Umbria. And here we see the cultivation, the harvesting of the lentils, and this photo was taken prior to October 2016. And here behind, you can see some of the flowerings which draw people to Castelluccio. This is the flowering of the poppies. Now, this, alas, is Castelluccio after the earthquake, October 30th, 2016. And I remember it like this. It is now off limits. It's in rubble. These are the back streets of Castelluccio. Just a little gem of a town. And I wonder about the people that we met when we used to walk through Castelluccio. We'd always go up there in summer to see the flowerings, which I'm going to be talking about in a minute. I wonder where 𝓵𝓮𝓬𝓸𝓻𝓲𝓷𝓸 is. and where she's staying, and is she in a prefab, and she's far from her mountain town. This is 𝓵𝓮𝓸𝓸. If you'd go up there in the summer, you'd see her inside a shady corner of a garage, sifting through her lentils, sorting her lentils. I wonder where Davide is now. He and his family ran a lovely restaurant with a little store next to it. You could buy the lentils of Castelluccio. Do you remember that place, Brady? This is Brady on the left. He's from Fresno, California. He came with me on a tour with his grandparents, which included Castelluccio, an amazing trip we had. Though these are the delightful lentils of Castelluccio cooked with sausages. And these are the lentils served over bruschetta by wonderful Mariella in her little restaurant, 𝓹𝓮𝓵𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓸. Here she is grilling meats, and I wonder where she is and her husband and if they've been able to open, because this is the restaurant after the earthquake of October 30th, 2016. Ecco, 𝓹𝓮𝓵𝓵𝓲𝓷𝓸, coming from the Longobards ancient name of this castle, the Castello dei Senari. And her little restaurant is actually in the former stall where Oreste, her father-in-law, had kept his sheep. And he started helping the shepherds graze their flocks at the age of 5. But he said it was the life of sacrificio, grande sacrificio, but because there was the transumanza. From November to April, the shepherds had to take their sheep to lower ground. They couldn't stay up in the snow. And shepherds would be away from their family from November to April. So after over 60 years, he told me of this, or 70 years of this, he decided it was enough, and he sold all his sheep and just now had been raising a few oxen. I don't know where he is now, but he's not in Castelluccio. And this is a photo done by the fire department of Umbria after October 30th, 2016, flying over. With that earthquake, the land level dropped 70 centimeters in some places. Now that's about 30 inches, making access to the town impossible for a long time. The road is now repaired, but the town is empty and it's off limits. People go up in the summertime to see the flowerings on the Great Plain below. And this sign here says, "The earthquake has destroyed our homes. You are most welcome. Do not destroy our crops." In other words, be respectful as you walk through to take your photos. This tree here, or this forest of trees, cone-bearing trees, fir trees, this was planted in 1961. It's the boot of Italy to commemorate the unification of Italy in 1861. And this is an example of the flowerings. They're absolutely stunning. The flowerings are lasting from late June to early July. This year we did not even go up because we saw on television about the cars backed up on the roads for people trying to go up to see the flowerings. There's a phase where you go up to see the cornflowers. Wild mustard is another phase. Spectacular is when the poppies blossom. And there's the poppies below the boot of Italy. Cornflower. The cornflower as well. This photo I took, and I took this prior to the earthquake. And I think this was not taken prior to the earthquake. Yes, Castelluccio is still destroyed. This was taken a couple years ago. And, you know, erroneously, there are many, many articles. I want you all to read about the flowerings of Castelluccio. You'll see many, many articles with false information. This is the flowering of the lentil fields. No, it's not. The lentil flower is white. This is the flowering of plants called infestive, which generally would be eliminated where there's agriculture. But the farmers of this area very wisely have understood that all these plants, they're weeds, poppies, cornflower, wild mustard. What do? They hold the moisture into the soil, which makes it possible, therefore, for the cultivation of the lentils. So no, this is not the flowering of the lentil fields, or not the flowering of the lentils. Yes, it's the flowering of where the lentils will grow, but the flowering takes place before the harvest of the lentils, which is in July. And the lentil flowers are not these extraordinary colors. So let us hope that on your next trip, you can be in Norcia. We want you to live the many splendors of Castelluccio and Preci and Norcia. And thank you for coming. Thank you very much for those who have made their donations already. And I'm so appreciative of those who will be making donations. Thank you very much. And Happy New Year, everyone. Buon anno nuovo.